Welcome, everyone. We thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Paul Bishop. I'm the President and CEO of ABC, the Association of Boards of Certification. Joining me today and co-hosting today's webinar is ABC's Vice President of Operations, Megan Baker. As many of you know, ABC is the leading provider of testing and certification services for the water environment industry. We're excited to be with you today to formally introduce our new standardized exams. Today, you'll learn about our exam philosophy, the science that went into their development. As well, we'll do our best to address all your questions and share with you what you can expect during the implementation process taking place over the next few months and year. Joining Megan and I today will be our resident psychometric expert, along with a number of our subject matter experts, men and women who are actually working in the field today, who are engaged in the process from the beginning. So, due to a large number of participants, we expect over about 100 people today registered for today's webinar. We won't be able to unmute the phone lines, so we will ask that all questions be accepted only by text. Submit anytime in the box to the right of your screen that's highlighted there. Many of you also submitted questions in advance. For that, we thank you. So we hope to answer many of those questions as we progress through the webinar. We'll be addressing all those at that time. At the end of today's presentation, we will have an additional question and answer where we'll address, again, the pre-submitted and the ones that you do during the webinar. And we'll do all that in the 90 minutes we've allotted today. Keeping in mind that any questions regarding your specific program will be better addressed one-on-one following today's webinar. With that out of the way, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Megan Baker. Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm ABC's Vice President of Operations. Been with the organization about 7, going on 8 years now. So I've had a good opportunity to see a couple of different exam development cycles, and am really excited about how this one went. We had unprecedented participation. Very excited to share with you the enhancements that have been made to the resources you have and to fill you in on what our subject matter experts have been up to for the past, 3-4 years now. So our 2017 exams, to clarify for everybody, we are looking at the water treatment, wastewater treatment, collection, and distribution exams. ABC offers 4 levels of each of these. 1 is our lowest and 4 is our highest. So we have 16 new exam forms that are now available for use through the testing service. That doesn't mean everybody has to use these exams. It's simply a service you have to choose from among the customized and the standardized exam options that have always been out there. So this is an opportunity for you to learn about these 16 exam forms that you may choose to adopt for your program, or that your program may be adopting for you as a stakeholder of that organization. Our agenda is pretty packed today. We've got several things to run through. We're going to start off with John Salvi, who's going to fill us in on just a little bit of background about ABC and our exam philosophy. John has worked with the City of Las Vegas as a pre-treatment program regulator since 1990 and has worked with the Nevada Water Environment Association Certification Board since 2004. He's been with ABC since 2001 as a regulatory subject matter expert, and is now the chair of our Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals. Next, we'll be talking about the science behind exam development, taking a look at what goes into the psychometric process. That will be led by Dr. Andrew Falcone, who joined Applied Measurement Professionals, an organization you knew as AMP, but is now known as PSI. And he's been with them since 1992. He started as a program manager and is now a director of psychometrics there. He has a doctoral degree in industrial organizational psychology from the Illinois Institute of Technology, and he has some technical expertise in psychometric theory, experimental design, psychological testing, and employment testing. Third, we'll talk about the highlights of the need-to-know criteria and formula conversion tables. I'll be taking that section. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of the documents that you can see posted on our website. Those are the things we want you to share with your stakeholders and make sure they understand how to use in order to prepare for the exams. Fourth, we will talk about jurisdictional content. Thank you again for submitting your questions ahead of the webinar. We had several on these, so Paul is going to go into detail about the process that led to the current exams and how that interacts with your jurisdictional questions in regards to regulations and similar topics. After Paul shares his comments, we'll hear from Andrew Barenbrock with Ohio EPA and Lori Sharp with Iowa DNR on how they have, within their own certification programs, approached those regulatory and jurisdictional questions. Andy has been with the Ohio EPA since April of 2003 and serves as the manager of operations, resiliency, and certification section. Prior to being employed there, he worked as an environmental consultant to Florida's DEP, where he oversaw restoration of the Everglades in addition to wastewater compliance enforcement. He also coordinates NPDES inspections and technical assistance to industrial and domestic wastewater treatment facilities during his time at Florida DEP, along with serving as a member of the department's emergency response team. He holds a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University in zoology, as well as a master's degree from Nova Southeastern University in marine science. Lori has been with the Iowa DNR for more than 13 years and is head of the operator certification program for water, distribution, wastewater, and well contractor certification. She previously worked for the Iowa Public Health Department with the lead poisoning prevention and lead abatement certification program. She's had many leadership positions with ABC, including chair of the Certification Commission, Certification Council Director, and a member of the Model Standards Task Force and the Bylaws, Policies, and Procedures, Continuing Education, Reciprocity, and Trainers Committees. Once we hear from Lori and Andy, we'll hear from our subject matter experts. We brought in 3 folks that have been key to the process of exam development over the past few years. In no particular order on the screen, we have Brian Thorburn, who has been involved in water and wastewater treatment operations for more than 20 years, with experience in many different water and wastewater plants and systems. In addition to his work as a certified operator, Brian enjoys teaching water treatment courses, and he has served on his local certification board, which is the Environmental Operator Certification Program in British Columbia, Canada, as well as on the ABC Board of Directors, including a term as ABC President in 2014. He's now serving on the Water Treatment Scheme Committee and also providing some assistance to the Distribution Scheme Committee. Chuck Vanderkolk has been in the water industry for more than 40 years, and he currently manages the potable water system for the city of Zeeland, Michigan, as water supervisor for the Zeeland Board of Public Works. His involvement with ABC began in 2002 when AWWA's president appointed him to serve as the association's representative to ABC Board. He was in that position for 10 years and is now in a capacity as a distribution scheme committee member, and he also had some service as distribution operations commissioner through much of the exam development process. Third, we have Leanna Risso on the line. She currently serves as the assistant manager of process control at the Clark County Water Reclamation District wastewater treatment plant. She also coordinates the College of Southern Nevada's water and wastewater degree programs. Her involvement with ABC includes serving as C2EP's Wastewater Treatment Operations Commissioner and serving as a member of the Wastewater Treatment Scheme Committee. She holds a Class 4 Wastewater Treatment Operator certification as well as a Class 2 Wastewater Laboratory Analyst certification. Our 7th stop will be with Tom Healy, Program Manager here on the ABC staff. He is going to fill you in on what it would take for your program to get these exams implemented if you choose to do so. And finally, we'll have some time for questions and answers. Again, you can type those questions at any time via the questions panel where you can actually type in your text. We may be holding some of those questions for the end. If we're able to get them to the speaker and get them responded in live, we'll do our best, but for the most part, count on us answering all of your questions at the end of the webinar. As Paul mentioned, due to the large number of registrants, we won't be able to unmute the phone lines. So again, please use that text panel. We'll also be respecting everybody's time by reserving questions pertinent to only one program or stakeholder on the line for an offline conversation to best utilize our time together. So our first stop, John Salty, will fill us in on the history and philosophy of ABC and our exam programs.
Thanks, Megan, and good day to everybody. Paul asked me to share a little background on my past and current involvement with ABC exam development, and really more importantly, changes I've seen over the years that brought us to where we are today. As Paul had alluded to, I began serving with ABC about 17 years ago as a regulatory subject matter expert on a validation and examination committee. We now call them scheme committees. Also chaired that committee for a number of years. And really, exam development back then followed the same general principles we do today. The main difference being back then we had a lot more flexibility to be able to deviate from the norm, and we can't do that today. In fact, Andrew is going to be going into detail shortly on how stringent those principles have become today. Also served on the board of directors for a number of years, along with various committees and task forces. And a real highlight for me in all of this was how much I learned about how diverse the needs and concerns are of you, the ABC members, and you, the ABC testing clients. And just as importantly, if not more, the challenges those bring to developing standardized exam. Now, my current role is chairing ABC's Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals. And for those who may not be aware, C2EP was actually formed to comply with current national and international credentialing standards. And C2EP's charge is to administer ABC's professional operator program in 4 disciplines: drinking water treatment operators, distribution operators, wastewater treatment operators, and collection operators. And those exams that are developed by C2EP are the same exams that are used by you, the ABC testing clients, who are using standardized exams. Really, if there's one overriding ABC guiding principle that's constantly hammered home for me, it's this, and it's that we are you and you are us. And by that, I mean we being ABC and you being the certifiers and the testing clients. Because at the end of the day, when we look at each other, we're all the same group of people, because all of us are certifiers. And it's because ABC isn't a company, but rather a professional association that's formed and governed by you, the ABC membership. And some of the changes we've had to make over the years to comply with today's credentialing standards have been difficult, to say the very least, but no less so for those of us serving on the Certification Commission and the Board of Directors, as those decisions directly affect our programs as much as they do your programs. So bottom line, we're all in this together. Now, I've seen a major shift in credentialing approaches, at least at ABC, over the past, say, 5, 10, 15 years. Back in what we call the old days, the focus was really on creating the perfect exam. Everything revolved around creating the perfect exam. And really, at the end of the day, there really is no such thing as a perfect exam. And today's focus is entirely on securing an airtight exam development process that can withstand the legal challenges of today's litigious environment. Now, many years ago, as I alluded to earlier, we had more flexibility to sway from the norm. Things like replacing 10 questions on the standardized exam for you and still being able to call it standardized. We couldn't even consider that today under today's credentialing standards. Now, the upside to all of this is that today's stringent psychometric processes guarantee a far more accurate tool for assessing operator competency. And one thing I can't overemphasize enough is that the changes we needed to make to the current standardized exam content are all about protecting you, the testing client, and you, the credentialing authority, to be able to provide you with valid, legally defensible exams. And as many of us can attest, that doesn't come without some heartache and pain at times, but the reason we go to those lengths is for you, and by extension for all of us and all of our programs. Now, one topic that will be delved into during today's webinar is the absence of regulatory questions, the reasoning that led to that change, and fresh approaches moving forward. And I'll underscore that this is a topic that's been challenging for both scheme committees and certifying authorities to effectively address, and will likely require adjustments in our collective thinking and approach as we move forward. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Megan.
Thank you, John, for that background and insight. We'll now turn to Andrew Falcone to share some of the nuts and bolts of what that process to build a validated standardized exam looks like. Andrew?
All right, thank you. And yeah, I wanted to start off by saying I agree completely with John. I am extremely inflexible about everything, so I'm going to go ahead and start that off right off the bat, but especially when it comes to exam development. Anyway, you know, the major components of a professionally developed credentialing exam program, as you see them up on the screen there: job analysis, item writing or writing test questions, then you move into actually building the examination form. The standard setting is setting the cut scores, or the number of items that you need to get correct to pass is all that means. Then after you get the cut scores, you administer the exam. And so after that, we have to do a lot of exam performance review. We call it item analysis. And what we do is we run extensive analysis to look at the performance of each item on all the exams. All 16 of the exams, we went through this process to see if the items are performing as they should. And after all that stuff is done, then we release a score report. So that's part of, you know, the initial, the pilot study kind of setup. after all these steps are done and approved and everything is correct, then we move into that instant score reporting mode where you get a score report as soon as you take the exam. But, you know, when you start new programs, exam programs, you have to kind of go through all these steps and proceed very cautiously to make sure everything is correct. And then after we do that, we move on to an instant score report mode, which we are in now, which simply means everyone gets their score report as soon as they take the exam. All right. And we have this slide up here about professional standards. And so the PO program I have lives by these standards of practice. You know, in the process of developing this new program, we follow these things very, very closely up on the screen. The standards for educational and psychological testing, the accreditation certification program standards, NCCA, and then the international standards are the ISO. And those are not only giving guidance on specific procedures in doing job analysis, item writing, all these types of things, but also we're talking about other stuff too, the administration of it, governance. And so these are truly the three Bibles that underlie any professionally developed credentialing program. The PO program followed these things explicitly and to the letter, and that is one of the hallmarks of a professionally developed credentialing program. So they are strict guidelines to meet, but they must be followed. All right. Now we're going to just jump into job analysis for just a little bit. Like, what is a job analysis, or the purpose of it? Simply identifying what the operator does on the job in its simplest terms. And once we do that by sending out surveys, but before we get to that discussion of surveys, we identify what the operator does, and then we identify, well, we've identified what they've done, but how important are some of these job duties? How significant are these job duties? Because there's going to be some variability in the level of importance of certain job tasks. Some are less important, some have moderate importance, some are extremely important. And so we find that out when we do these extensive survey analyses. And the content that is less important or the least important, we don't, consider that for inclusion on the content outline. And so we're not going to have a test question written to content that very few operators are actually performing a given duty. And certainly we're not going to test candidates on content that isn't of any importance. So we go through all this analysis and we determine not only which tasks or duties is the operator performing, but how important is that task or duty. And while we're doing that, we're upholding the standards of professional credentialing exam development. That's kind of linked back to those three guiding documents that we had on the previous screen. So this is all interrelated in the establishment of content validity. All right. Kind of back to the surveys a little bit. So nearly 5,000 operators completed the job analysis surveys, and I have that thing that says it's a lot of expertise. It's a heck of a lot of expertise. That is a very large number, 5,000. And so they were giving input. In other words, they were completing the surveys. They were telling us yes or no, do they perform this given task or job duty? And then they told us how important it was. Some of the other analysis that we do conduct are regional or experience analysis. We have that bullet point up there that we had 54 U.S. states and territories and 11 Canadian provinces and territories were involved in these 16 job analysis surveys. So it was very diverse. It was coast to coast and into Canada. All these folks had their input into the development of the content outline. So what I didn't say is, and that's on the next slide, I think, but what I didn't say is you have the job of the operator, you create a survey, and then you analyze the survey, and the content outlines are an extraction of what's on the survey. So for example, if we have 200 task statements on the survey, as I said, the most important ones will be retained. So maybe of those 200 task statements, maybe only 172 of them were the most important. And they make their way to the content outline, and that becomes the basis or foundation to create the examination. Every item on these 16 examinations is written to a position on that content outline. So the exam is anchored to the content outline. The content outline is anchored to the job analysis survey. The job analysis survey is anchored back to operators. So it's one big chain of content validity And I think, Megan, could you go back to that previous slide for a moment, please? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think I covered it. But I just pointed out that we have those 16 programs. And so these job analysis that we did to each of these groups, it covered all 4 programs and the 4 classes within. Thank you. I'll go to the next one now. Okay. Now this one, that previous slide there, it does kind of link up what we're talking about there that I've said as far as the linkage, the job of the operator, the survey, the outline, and then the exam. So this is the flow of events that must take place for the establishment of content validity. And that just simply means, well, what are we testing people on? Well, the content of the job. How do we know what the content of the job is? Well, we sent a darn survey to thousands and thousands of operators, and they told us about the content. That's how we know. And then, of course, we write test questions to address that content. All right. Oh, yes. One of the products of the job analysis, and I know most of you are familiar with this document. This is the Water Treatment Class 1 content outline. And we have 16 of these things. So this content outline is the result or a product of the job analysis, as I said. And these are the most important tasks that were retained. And we found that out by the analysis that we did. And you see across the top there, it kind of tells us how many test questions or items are associated with a given content category. So if you look at treatment process, we see there are 30 items, 30 out of 100 items on the water treatment operator class 1 exam. So that's a fair chunk of the exam, 30% to be exact. And then that's distributed across this complexity level. Won't go into too much discussion about that, but it says 12, 18, 0. That simply says that there are varying levels of complexity on the job of the operator. Some things the operator does might be more routine, perhaps simpler in nature. Some reach a moderate complexity level, and some reach a very high complexity level. So in as much as we can, we try to capture that complexity on the job analysis survey, on this content outline, and then we try to mirror it or wire it into the exam. And that's kind of what that's about. Okay. And okay, then we move to item writing or test question writing. Well, we had a huge item writing workshop. I think it was back in April 2016, or was it 2015? 2016, I believe. We had, I don't know, 40, 50 people. We had a lot of folks here from all the major job, all the categories and all the class levels. And they wrote nearly 1,000 new items for these exams in about a day and 3/4. So it was a lot of work. And those items went through just a tremendous amount of review, not only internally by us here at PSI, but we had several other groups of operators reviewed the initial work of what the operators wrote. So those initial items, we gave them to another group to review. So those items were edited and improved. You know, mostly they're looking, is the content appropriate? Does it fit the outline? Is the structure correct? Is the reference correct? That type of stuff. The strength of this design is you have one group writing the items, another group reviewing the items. Granted, there was some overlap there for continuity, but you're much stronger methodologically when you have more subject matter experts involved. And that's easy to see. If 10 people create an exam, that's not as strong as a design as if 20 or 30 people create it. That's kind of the logic. These programs have a heck of a lot of people involved in the construction of it. Many, many, many operators from all over the country and Canada with varied levels of experience had their say of what went into this exam. So we talk about the items that were edited and reviewed and so forth, and a lot of those items maybe didn't make it. You know, we wrote almost 1,000, but maybe, I don't know, I don't have a number here, maybe 782 or 829 survived the review. Well, I got to tell you, you know, some item writers were offended by that, that the items that they wrote that were near and dear to them, that they sweated over, they got rejected because they didn't meet the standards. And we did provide counseling to them, so don't worry about that. They were taken care of. But that did happen. Some people were kind of upset about that. All right? Okay. Coming down the home stretch. On setting the cut scores here, we have operators discussing the competency levels initially. So when we start out to determine the cut score, which simply means, of course, you all know what that means, but it's the number of items that you need to get correct to pass the exam. There were extensive discussions about competency levels required to pass the exam? What mastery level did you need? We talked about eligibility. We talked about a number of different things. So they evaluated and discussed the difficulty level of these items, 1,600 items plus pretest items, and try to determine their difficulty level while simultaneously thinking about the profession, upholding the standards of profession, and determining a cut score. So they had to kind of weigh the differences in there, how difficult the items are, how difficult the exam is in general, think about mastery. How many items do we need to get correct to pass this thing, you know, to uphold standards of the profession and all our professional standards that we talked about at the front end of this little presentation. So there's a lot that goes into the setting of those cut scores. All right. And there's my last slide. So after we did all that stuff, extensive job analysis, item writing, item review, draft test review, you know, the examination committee members, they actually took the exam multiple times. They were pretty much tired of doing that. But as we talked about, I have no flexibility when it comes to exam development. We have to do it the way that we do it here. But anyway, after all that stuff is done, we get to the point where we look at the results. So we run what we call preliminary item analysis. And that's simply looking to see how each individual item performed. And what we can see in that is sometimes we can detect item flaws in there no matter how many reviews they get, and they get a lot of scrupulous reviews. Many, many, many times, 4, 5, 6 times. Sometimes items are still flawed. They slip through. It's pretty rare, but occasionally they do. And so we'll see that with the item statistics. And sometimes we can make adjustments there to compensate for that, and just to make sure that everyone is given fair and equal treatment by the exams. We don't want someone passing or, of course, failing an exam based on an item flaw. So we had a bunch of meetings to review the results, and then we ran a final item analysis, and this included some scoring adjustments. And so after all that's said and done, we get to the point where we can, finally release the score reports to folks. We were waiting for it a long time. So I'm kind of concluding with that one I put in red there. We would be hard-pressed to design an exam program that is more valid or methodologically sound. I don't think we can. And if any of you think you can, I'll be personally offended if you tell me that. Anyway, I think that wraps it up for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I can't say how much we've appreciated having Andrew's support and that of his colleagues. We've had multiple individuals from PSI working directly with our committees and also hosting our committees down in fabulous Olathe, Kansas. So we definitely know how to treat our SMEs. We'll take a look next at the outcomes of these things as far as the actual tangible documents that you can take and use with your programs as you're preparing individuals for those exams. We're going to start out by kind of just aligning what we did along with what Andrew described. So this is just a screenshot of one of our advisory committee meetings. In addition to Olathe, Kansas, we treated some folks to a nice meeting in Des Moines, Iowa, here by the ABC office. This is where we started out with our job analysis meeting. So this is just one of the 4 working groups. Overall, we had, I think, upwards of 30 SMEs here in Des Moines starting those surveys that are the foundation of the job analysis. So as Andrew alluded to, we really had record participation in that survey. We pushed it out to all of ABC's contacts. We posted it on the website. We published it over social media. And our partner organizations like AWWA and WEF and some of these smaller MAs and AWWA sections also helped us to push that out. So that's where we were able to gather that huge response rate of over 5,000 individuals actually completing the survey to give us data that we could use for the analyses. So hopefully you all are familiar with these, you participated, you saw it, I hope, but just to give you a quick reminder of what that looks like, it's up on the screen. We saw the demographics section flash by, asking things like work location, job role, level of certification, system facility information, looking for things like your largest pipe, your population served, kind of those sorts of characteristics about the environment of the operator. And for every single task, and there was about 730 of them across the 4 surveys, the respondents, those 5,000 people, had to give us a 1 to 5 rating that told us about the frequency and importance of those tasks. So a lot of data gathered through those surveys that were put together over the course of really months. So ahead of this meeting that we saw in the last screenshot, there was a lot of effort to collect current job logs, current job descriptions, training materials, all of those pieces that outline what the job of an operator is. A lot of research had gone into this point. So of those 5,000 responses, that was PSI's job to do some initial analyses. They then guided our SME panels through upwards of 100 hours of webinars to review those results and prepare the exam specifications. So Andrew showed you one representation of the exam content outline. This is what we did to kind of package it for your operators. So it's the same information you saw on Andrew's slide with the 30 items of the one content area. This is just our document, the need to know criteria that you're all familiar with. And we're going to walk through that document pretty specifically. So in this process, how these tasks get here, they're actually analyzed one by one based on all of that survey data. We look at things like background information, percentage of respondents performing, the overall mean significance rating of every single task. We also look at subgroup analyses to make sure that differences in geography, population served, years of experiences are accounted for and addressed. So the tasks that actually make it through all of those analyses end up in this need to know criteria document, which is posted on the website. So these are the core tasks that an operator needs to know, that these are the testable topics for the exam, and we're going to randomly sample from them through the exam process. So as with previous editions of the need to know criteria, the job tasks are grouped in like areas, which we call content areas. So you can see 5 content areas on the sample shown on the screen. There are a few different features when you compare those to our old need to know criteria. First, at the bottom there, you'll see the note about the pretest questions, which Andrew's kind of hinted at. There are, for all of the new 16 standardized exams, 10 pretest questions included on the form. Only 100 of the 110 questions the candidate responds to are counted toward the score, but those 100 are predetermined. We know which 100 will be counted and which 10 are pretest. They're not identified though. We want candidates to attempt all 110 questions with equal care for every single item. That does raise, of course, questions about how much time an operator should have to complete the exam. Our standard for the exam has always been 3 hours for the 100 questions, and looking at time needs and industry standards for exams, we are well over time to that 3-hour time limit. So there is ample time for an examinee to complete the 110 questions and the 3-hour time limit that ABC recommends. Traditionally, if you look at the industry, that 100 question exam would have typically been administered in 2-hour time limit. So we essentially had an extra hour. So there's plenty of time for candidates to complete all of this content. We do need the pretest questions, and we do need them to be answered with care because they're important to our psychometricians to gather statistical data to evaluate these new test questions. We're going to look at their performance before we put them on a new exam. This allows us to introduce new content to the exam forms without having to delay scores and conduct pilots like we did this spring. So this will allow for a much more seamless update of exams moving forward. So again, I just want to reiterate, only 100 questions, 100 predetermined questions are scored, and the passing score for our 16 exam forms is 70%. We did go through the cut score process that Andrew outlined and arrived at that 70% in a psychometrically valid fashion. So another piece that you want to take note of here that is new is that the total number of calculation items on the exam is now clearly called out. You can see that in the green circle in the lower right-hand corner. 15 calculations on this sample need to know criteria, and that will be specified for each of the examinations. The number of calculation items on each exam is in line with precedent, but this is the first time that we have actually put it right there on that exam content outlines to be very clear to operators and those helping them prepare that there are calculations on this exam so that they can keep that in mind as they're working toward their sitting date. And finally, there is additional information in that right-hand column. It is about complexity of questions in each content area. And this was really established once the final content outlines were completed. The committees actually went through every single job task one more time, and they rated the complexity for every single item. So for the content areas, we see that the 3 levels of complexity are listed for each. We're going to look into those a little bit deeper. They're known as recall, application, and analysis. So this screen gives you a sample. It's not a real test question. It's just a sample to demonstrate the idea behind a recall level question. Recall questions are typically going to be asking you about a specific fact, concept, process, or procedure, there's not going to be a lot of problem solving involved. You're going to see words like discover, identify, illustrate, label, list, name, observe, recall, or recognize. Those are the sorts of things that operators will be doing in those recall items. Our second level is application. Again, this is just a sample, not a true test question on the screen. At this level of application, you're going to start doing some basic problem solving. Calculations might come in at this level. There could be some interpretation or application of data as well. So words that make you think of application are to differentiate, explain, specify, translate, classify, compare, describe, calculate, categorize, or apply. And the most complex test questions fall into the analysis level. Again, a sample on the screen for you to view. These are going to be higher level problem solving questions. They're going to require some evaluation or fitting together of different variety of elements into a whole. So there's potentially a lot of steps to these questions. They're not just recalling information. You actually have to work through a scenario to get to the solution. Words that might come into play here: analyze, evaluate, forecast, formulate, generalize, infer, integrate, judge, predict, or synthesize. Again, for the benefit of the operators and those who are assisting them, these definitions are completely spelled out right above that table where the number of recall application analysis items are spelled out in the exam content outline. So that is available right there in the introduction of the need to know criteria. Also introduced or reorganized, I suppose, is the supporting knowledge. So the committees also went to rate supporting knowledge for each of the content domains. So we looked at those 5 different content areas on the first slide, categorizing the content itself. So these actual content areas are what are linked to the job tasks and what the test questions are testing over. This supporting knowledge is simply areas of knowledge that are going to support the operator in being successful at the exam and at the job tasks included in those categories. So they won't be tested over directly. Previous editions of the need to know criteria had supporting knowledge included in them, but they were listed as supporting knowledge under each content domain's task list. So that meant a single knowledge type could be repeated over and over throughout. With our new organization, everything's arranged in a grid. There is a row of knowledge types along the left. So all those rows, which we'll zoom into in a moment, are knowledge types, and the columns themselves are the content areas we saw earlier, those 5 content areas. So we can now see if a single knowledge type impacts multiple content areas. These are rated at 3 levels: basic, intermediate, and advanced. So for the basic level, we're talking about fundamental knowledge. You might use some training, or it could just be on-the-job experience that is helping you attain this kind of knowledge. It's generally going to apply to routine tasks or established procedures, things with low complexity. Lacking this basic level of knowledge isn't going to have a huge impact on job performance. It's not going to impact public safety or welfare. Our second level is intermediate. This is going to be a little bit more knowledge. You're going to need a little more training. At this point, you should be able to apply fundamental concepts. You should be able to understand and discuss the application and implication of changes to processes, policies, and procedures in the content area. If you don't have this level of knowledge, there could be some significant impacts on both job performance and public safety and welfare. Our most complex items or knowledge areas, of course, are going to be in the advanced level. This requires a very high level of knowledge. Operators who have this kind of level of knowledge are functioning at an expert level. You should be able to apply both fundamental and highly developed concepts at this point. They should be able to design, review, and evaluate processes, policies, and procedures in the content area. If you lack this level of knowledge, if you're at this level, you could have a serious impact on your job performance, and there could be a lot of harm to the public safety and welfare. So to summarize those new need to know criteria features that have rolled out along with the 2017 exams, we're looking at more streamlined content outlines. So the tasks themselves are very clearly written. There are fewer of them. We have complexity totals by domain. Those are those recall, application, and analysis levels we saw for each content domain on the exam. We have knowledge statement levels, again, organized in that grid we just looked at. We've called out the number of calculation items on the exams, and there is no jurisdictional content. And Paul is going to dive into that in a few minutes. The formula conversion tables that are provided to the candidates during their exam were also updated alongside the new 2017 forms. A small committee of subject matter experts double and triple checks the calculation items on the exams based on the information provided in the current tables. So the formulas, values, and formulas are what need to be used to complete all exam calculations. For example, pi on the formula conversion table is truncated to 3.14. So operators attempting these exams are going to get the best answer by using that 3.14 value rather than the pi button on their calculator or 3.147 or any other value. So it's important to make sure you're utilizing that during the exam and that you're familiar with it before you head into the exam session. The calculation format on the exams includes both metric and US customary units side by side. So this screenshot gives you just, again, a sample of what that might look like. So of course, the most popular question we get from ABC over the telephone is, where do I start to prepare for my exam? So ABC's website has an examination study resources area. It has links to the formula conversion tables, which will be administered with the exam. So the candidate is free to grab those from the web and study and prepare with them. It has a list of study guides that are relevant to these exams themselves. There are some sample exam questions, and I always want to give the caution here that these sample exam questions are not included on any exam form. They have not gone through the full item validation process. Their main purpose is really to give a candidate a sense of what a multiple choice single response question looks like and how it kind of fits into the ABC standardized exams. So these aren't practice exams, but they are sample questions. What's neat about those sample questions, if you have a candidate that is taking a web-based or computer-based exam, whether it's administered by your certification program or the folks at PSI, there are some sample exam questions in that electronic format. So a candidate can actually log in and practice taking basically an online exam or a computer-based exam, advancing through the interface, answering their questions, navigating with that interface. So that's something to definitely check out if you have anybody who has anxiety about using technology to complete their exam. The need to know criteria, of course, are also linked there. And there's a computer-based testing demo as well. So that CBT demo is really a video that walks the candidate through the experience at the PSI Test Center, from candidate check-in to seeing what their screen is going to look like on their computer, all of those pieces, so that they feel, again, comfortable approaching that test day. All of the reference material used for the exams is also listed on the website. You can see there on the left screen that we had about those upwards of 40 SMEs that did the item writing Andrew talked about, actually used these texts. They were physically lined up to grab these. We were fortunate to have support from AWWA, WEF, and CSUS in the form of donation of those texts so that they would be readily available for item writing and review. And generally, these are the texts that we use. However, each jurisdiction has typically a preference between the AWWA WEF side of things or the CSU side of things. So it's really a jurisdictional discretion or a training program discretion as to which are best for you and your operators. I would like to mention, however, that the AWWA WSO series in that bottom right-hand corner have been recently completely redesigned to better serve operators preparing for exams. The texts are split into levels. So for water treatment, we have a 1, a 2, and a combined 3 and 4. And for the distribution, there's a combined level 1 and combined level 3 and 4 books. So that's to help operators prepare with material that's more suited to their level. These exams, those texts were referenced during this item writing workshop. Additional study materials are also listed on the website. We're excited that the newest WEF operator study guide for wastewater has already been aligned to the 2017 need to know criteria. And we're also currently in progress with collaborating with WEF and AWWA on some new materials that will be aligned with the new need to know criteria. So AWWA will be releasing a new study guide in print as part of their WSO series, and WEF is also developing some new operator fundamentals manuals that are targeted more toward the operator demographics than maybe what you're think of when you think of a WEF MOP that has some high-level information in there. So this should be more at the operational level. and better aligned for the information operators need for the exam. Those should be out in the first quarter of 2018. So a lot of new exciting resources coming our way. For candidates that are trying to decide where they need to focus their study after an unsuccessful exam attempt, they should definitely be utilizing their score reports to help them choose what to focus on. So on the screen is a sample computer-based testing score report that would come from a PSI test center. Score reports look a little bit different depending on whether you took a paper-based, web-based, or computer-based exam, but they all have something like this that accomplishes the same goal. The most important part of this report is the performance information, which is aligned with the content areas. These are the same content areas that appear on the need-to-know criteria. So candidates should use this to identify which areas need most improvement, then review the need-to-know criteria for more details on the job tasks they can be tested on, and then select study materials or courses that are going to deepen their understanding within this content before reattempting the exam. In accordance with industry standards, this is the most detailed content area or mastery type report we can provide. If we go to smaller groups of information, the data won't be reliable. And again, we want to make sure that the candidate is proficient overall in the need-to-know job tasks. Also available from ABC is the Mastery Summary Report. This aggregates a group of candidates' performance. It allows the certifier to look for overall trends among candidates and possibly introduce new training opportunities to fill those gaps. Again, it provides for each content area some basic information on how candidates are performing. On the right-hand side, you see, based on total number of points in that content area, how candidates are performing on average, as well as the high score and the low score. Toward the left, you see some mastery information, and it's just kind of showing you high, low, or medium performance. It's kind of what that mastery M stands for. PM is partial mastery, so we're in that medium category, or the non-mastery is in the low category with that NM. So that's how the mastery summary report works. This is only available to certification programs that are using the testing service, and it can only include their candidates. It is a special order, but it's something that is available to those clients. With that, we're going to turn it over to Paul to talk a little bit more about jurisdictional content on the exam.
Thank you, Megan. Greatly appreciate it. A lot of great information in there. So we've come to the part of the webinar where, frankly, most of the questions have been submitted, and understanding it's probably creating some angst, but we wanted to definitely share with you why ABC did not include some specific exam questions on rules and regulations. As you heard from Andrew, John, and Megan, the importance of following the certification industry standards for exam development just cannot be overstated. These standards have guided us through this entire exam development process. And please note, ABC is first and foremost a member-driven organization. We represent an incredibly diverse group of countries, territories, provinces, and states with varied regulatory requirements. The standardized exams are utilized by a large number of our clients whose regulations on a single subject differ between jurisdictions and/or levels of governance. Federal levels are often less stringent than state or provincial limits. We also discovered that many community and/or local wastewater treatment facilities have more stringent limits than the feds or state provincial governments. So you take that times 80 clients representing 100+ diverse members, and you can see the beginnings of our dilemma. As we explore the inclusion or exclusion of regulatory questions, we did so in consultation with PSI, also our subject matter experts who are men and women who work currently in the field, operation field, and many of our trusted volunteer leaders who are OPCERT administrators. We recognized and continue to recognize that rules and regulations are an incredibly important part of what an operator should know. Please understand, we recognize that, and it's one of those things we really wanted to address. Well, we also realized a few truths. One, that including rule and regulatory questions on an internationally utilized exam introduces issues of bias. Though we previously had a Canadian standardized form and a US standardized form that include appropriate rules in either form, it doesn't serve our industry, and it undermines the standardization of our reciprocity efforts. Rules and regulations are as diverse as every state and province ABC represents. This diversity causes confusion with examinees about which potential question is correct, because one distractor or a wrong answer may actually reflect a current answer or correct answer for a different locale, state, or system requirement. A great example would be state disinfectant residual requirements, where the EPA requires 0.2 milligrams per liter chlorine residual. States, however, if you research, vary anywhere between 0.05 to 0.2 milligrams per liter. So anything between 0.05 and 0.2, if we put a 0.08, could be the response that an operator might have within their jurisdiction, their plant. So it creates confusion. And remember, on a standardized exam, the last thing we want is confusion. The contents need to be unbiased, meaning the candidates shouldn't be advantaged or disadvantaged based on the basis of their location or governing regulatory authority. Rules and regulations also are subject to change, sometimes quite frequently, especially on a state local level. However, fundamental physical, chemical, biological, mechanical concepts that underlie the very foundation of operations do not change. Exam forms take years to be developed and properly validated, months and years to be developed and properly validated, which means it's extremely difficult to adjust the exam quickly enough to reflect the latest changes in rules and regulations and still remain valid. Remember, an exam is validated as a whole. Changing any one question in an exam requires revalidation of the entire exam form. In addition, utilizing an exam, as some programs do, to expose operators isn't necessarily the best vehicle. Operators, once achieving a certain level of certification, may never take another exam in their career, and yet we need to be assured that they know the latest rules and regs for their area. So given all these factors, and again, in consultation with our resident experts, it was determined that regulation-based content was just inappropriate for a standardized exam. And by including that content in our exams, we'd be doing our members a great disfavor by providing a less than industry standard conforming examination. Again, recognizing rules and regs are important, part of what an operator should know. If an exam isn't the most appropriate place, we decided how to have candidates demonstrate their knowledge of regulations. We researched what may be better, what would be more effective ways to convey this information and candidate understanding. In our research, we recognize that change doesn't come easy to our program members or clients. And so a number of years ago, we endeavored to provide a resource, a service, if you will, to address the concerns called the Program Specific Module, or PSM for short. The PSM was designed to provide a separate exam or quiz developed by members to be conducted with an ABC exam. Just to be clear, program-specific modules are not meant developed psychometrically. They were not validated or valid. They were meant solely for use by a client to address a specific need. However, since the offering of the PSM for a number of years, only 2 members have actually chosen to use the service. So in recent discussions we found with board members and our volunteer leaderships, we discovered actually that the legitimacy of our newly developed standardized exams would be compromised if it conducted alongside a non-validated program-specific module exam. We heard discussions of how programs would add 10 to 20 questions and then base their passing score of a 70 on that total number. This kind of goes back to what John mentioned. This harkens back to the days when we would take off or remove 10 to 20 questions and put in program-specific rules and regulations without psychometrically developing the exam items or the new exam forms. If you recall, as John mentioned, we called it a modified standardized exam. Not exactly an oxymoron that I'm proud that we made part of our lexicon. But hopefully you see that such a modification invalidates those months, those years of work that go in to developing a standardized exam form. So unfortunately, I believe the program-specific module is similar by just adding questions, but it's just adding those questions instead of replacing them. And honestly, ABC wouldn't be representing you or our members or the operator community to the best of our ability if we to offer a standardized exam that isn't legally defensible and had the PSM and would create confusion amongst our members about who had it, who didn't, what the final score was. However, with all that said, ABC will continue to offer our testing clients customizable exam options to address any specific concerns they may have. We're going to do that with the understanding that our clients are legally responsible for those exams. We also have to be careful, though, that we want to make sure that in doing those customized exams and implementing them, we're not doing so in a way that jeopardizes the results of the ABC standardized exam. As I mentioned earlier, we take the issue of operators knowing and understanding rules and regulations seriously. We know it's an important part of our program, of your programs and testing clients, to document operators' knowledge and/or exposure to the most relevant and timely rules and regulations pertaining to the operation of their facility. However, we do believe that it's best done in the realm of training and education that takes place during the initial certification or upgrading of certification, and in the realm of continuing education that takes place during recertification. Two ABC members have developed what we consider best practices to ensure operator awareness of the attestation to state-specific regulatory requirements. As Megan mentioned, so first up to describe his upcoming program, Andy Barenprock from Ohio EPA. Andy, take it away.
Thank you. This kind of plays perfectly into something we did. We were asked questions about the changes to ABC's exams and how we would handle not having rules within the questions in ABC's standardized exams. We are currently in the process of proposing rules that will require our operators to complete a course, an operator-based course that we will put together. We had initially intended it for just operator certification related rules, but now we will highlight any changing rules. So any operator who's taking an exam or renewing their certificate will be required to take this course and then attest to the fact that they've completed this course. For us, it will just be a PDF that we put on our website that operators will go to and review the PDF. They will attest to the fact that they've completed that review, and that will be part of the record as they go on. I think this is a great way to deal with rules because of the fact that, like Paul had suggested, an operator may take an exam and then never ever see those questions again, never see rule questions again, never need to know rules. And as we all know, rules are continuously changing. It's very difficult to have a consistent set of rules. I can point to us in Ohio. We have much more stringent lead rules than anyone else in the nation, based on Flint and our own lead situation. So if we were to try to use a standardized exam that had lead questions, our operators would actually not even know what our rules were because of the fact they'd be answering off the US EPA standards, and that wouldn't be a good thing. So I think taking the rules out is actually a good thing. You just need a way to deal with it. In our situation, we're going to have this course to deal with it. I think that will work very well for us. It also provides us a document that says that this individual supposedly reviewed a presentation that has those things in it, and they've acknowledged that they have. So in the event we get into an enforcement case, we know what the presentation was, we know what they acknowledged to see. They can't claim that they had no knowledge of the rules. If they do claim that, then they've falsified one of their applications that indicates they went through that and understood everything that was in it. So I think for our purposes, the changes ABC is making won't affect what we do. I think it actually ends up being a very good thing and works hand in hand with how our program is operating right now.
Thank you, Andy. Lori Sharp, Iowa DNR. Lori, would you like to share and expand on what Andy was saying, what you've done with your program?
You bet. In Iowa, we used to use the 2012 standardized exams, and as soon as the new ones were released, we switched to those. We were, as a program, pleased to hear that the regulatory questions were removed. We've always kind of felt that the exam should measure an operator's fundamental understanding of operation. Do they have the knowledge and ability to meet the regulation? We believe that rules define the goals and that the exam should demonstrate an operator has a skill and ability to reach that goal, whatever it might be, at whatever federal or state level it's set at. Not unlike Andy. We've just felt that we had a better control over and understanding of our operators' regulatory knowledge by using continuing education, certification eligibility, and renewal requirements as a checkpoint for regulatory knowledge. For example, and you know, the 2012 standardized exams had, I don't know, I think the drinking water ones had something like 12 to 15 federal regulatory questions. To me, I felt like these were 12 to 15 spots that could be used for better measurement of an operator's technical knowledge. We are more interested in, as a state, in an operator having the knowledge of the relationship between federal rules and our state rules. We're more interested in knowing that they know how to implement these state rules and how these requirements are reflected on their operating permit and what the proper implementation in our state of these permits. We've always, and in the last few years, have kind of been building up to this, and not unlike Andy, I think now have moved on to actually going to codify it in our rules, is that at every conference in the state of Iowa, I mean, operators get sick of it. They cannot get away from it. We talk about, we have a rules update, we have a rules review, we hammer away with them, at them with rule implementation, new rule implementation, old rules that people seem to be forgetting, stuff like that. We do the whole spectrum from very small systems. In the state of Iowa, they have to do a mandatory training and rules implementation. They bring along their permits. They are taught how what is required by their permit and how those rules are implemented at their facility. Moving on up to the basic courses. The basic courses, of course, just like they say, basic knowledge, and people use them as pre-exam courses, but also in there is a very in-depth review of again, like I said, the federal rules and how Iowa is implementing them and what that means to each individual operator. And then we move on to the higher levels. For example, in surface water treatment training, we're working with a contractor to put together some extensive training for that. And I happen to know that like an entire module of that training, like 1.5 days, concentrates on federal and Iowa regulations and rule implementation. So if you build up all these classes, you have control over these curriculums, you can go ahead and, like Andy said, you can they have to take one of these classes, some of these classes, to fulfill continuing education requirements, to fulfill recertification requirements, to fill initial certification requirements, all of the above. And we feel confident that everybody's getting the information that they need. We just feel this more comprehensive process ensures our operators understand existing and new rule implementation. And it also, as I think somebody mentioned previously, it helps with not allowing anyone to fall through the cracks. For example, if all you do is rely on a few exam questions in your exam, well, what about the people that took a test 20 years ago and there were different rules then? And how can you be certain and secure in feeling that they have the knowledge they need to implement these rules? So we kind of feel like that kind of answers that question too. Also, it kind of makes it easy for me to bring in people reciprocity-wise. If I know they've passed the standardized exam, they've passed an exam, the standardized exam, they meet our criteria, I can say, good. I'm not worried that you don't know anything about my rules yet, because before I give you a certification or before I give you reciprocity here, I'm going to put you in one of these classes, or you're going to learn those. So it just gives a better feeling that our operators just have a better base, have a better knowledge, have better resources for implementation. We can even use it as things that you can use. I mean, if you just really feel strongly about the testing part of it, them being tested over these, we do have some instructors who use pre and post testing, so they can gauge where they're falling short on their training. We sometimes look to compliance problems, and we can develop and zero in on certain compliance issues and rule implementation that is just seems people aren't getting, or we see a problem with or issue with throughout the state. So there's just all different ways you can go with it. And we've had nothing but, I just wanted to say we have nothing but positive feedback from our operators and trainers on the new exams, especially the new need to knows. We have several of our state curriculum developers who work with our water and wastewater technology program, and they really like the new need to knows. Like I said, my operators have been taking these new exams, and they're very positive about it, which, you know, we all know here that when you change an exam, you know, people grumble, people complain, nobody likes change, but really ultimately, I haven't heard anything. You know, they're passing them. They're not. Everybody's not failing. We're still right in the ballpark of where we need to be. And I guess the messages I want to get across is that I think programs should really think about in terms of their rule implementation is what's the best delivery for that? What's the best delivery for you to know as a program person that your people are really getting it? That, I mean, to me, 5 or 6 questions or 10 questions on an exam did not give me a warm, fuzzy feeling that they really did know the rules in my state or what they needed to implement.
Thank you, Lori. We really appreciate it. And if I may have missed it or you said it, but I know in a conversation you shared with me is that when they did say that, you know, if an operator didn't come back and said they didn't know it, because you give them CEUs for a lot of that, you have that record that they can't, similar to Andy, right? You have a record of them.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate both of you sharing those perspectives. And again, I hope this highlights, we do believe strongly in rules and regulations being taught to the operators, and understand, because of the complexity of those rules and regs, that hopefully through these types of formats that Andy and Lori have shared, it's not only about whether the operator knows them, it's whether how they understand them, comprehend, and then can also apply them. We're now going to turn over to some of our SMEs that took part in the planning and have them share some of their perspectives on the exam development, what they've heard today. Brian, Chuck, and Leanna, I think you're unmuted. Leanna, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to everybody who's joined us for the webinar today. I think we're all pretty proud of what we've turned out. As Andrew and Megan and everybody has referenced, we feel that these are some of the most psychometrically valid and well-developed exams that we've put out to date. And as you can tell from the discussion today, there was a whole extensive process, excuse me, from the job task analysis, surveys, to the need to know criteria development, finally getting into the item writing and putting everything together. And it wasn't done without consideration to the fact that the jurisdictional criteria was so diverse and so difficult to encompass in a standardized exam. So everything that has been done today has been developed to ensure that as certifying communities that we are turning out the best exam possible and the best tool to help you assess an operator's competency. And with that, I'd like to see if Brian or Chuck have anything additional.
Yeah, this is Chuck. I can add to that. All the way from the job analysis to the item writing to the standard setting to item analysis, score reporting, the whole thing, through the whole process. Obviously, it was reviewed by the PSI group, but also to validate it, these were reviewed over and over again by several groups of subject matter experts, and we did not. We continued until each of them persons agreed on every question and on every item. And if one person didn't agree, we'd go back to the drawing board and redo it again. So we're very pleased that that we came onto this consensus and think we got a great product here.
If I could just add on to that, there over 20 years ago, there when I first began writing operator exams, I used to think, well, who wrote these questions? And I always pictured these evil people making impossible questions, and it turns out that we're those evil people now, you know. But as you learn the process, you know, and how everything evolves, right? Because in the past, couple of the need to know and the exam development, sessions. We're seeing so many new faces. They're from all over each country. Everybody has a different background, but at the end of the day, they're all talking the same language, right? And even little things like item writing for questions, it seems easy, right? But in a couple days, we were supposed to write 25 questions, which at the beginning you think, oh, this will be a piece of cake. I'll be done by lunch. It's not a piece of cake. Every question has to be referenced, right? You can't just make up a question and not have a reference back that covers that answer as well, right? So as Andrew mentioned there, you sit around in a group at the table and you some of the questions, they don't make the cutting room floor, but also lots of the questions, they don't make it out of the room, or else, one person will start writing the question and then somebody else will take it over and you'll just bounce ideas off each other. And even with the new questions now that are on the exam, we were able there to kick out all these old obsolete items like DE filters or bag filters that aren't used anymore, but adding in questions like the membrane filters now, which were 20 years ago there weren't any questions like that on the exams, but with the advancement of them over the last 20 years, they're more common in the field now, right? The same with the math questions. Like years ago you'd get math questions and there was no formula for it, which you were supplied with. Nowadays the math questions, it has to have a formula because we want the operators to know how to figure it out, but they don't have to know every single math question off the top of their heads. And basically, as a trainer, as an operator, and as a past certification board member, I think these new exams are great, and I'm really looking forward to them.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's perspective. We're going to turn now to talk about how you as testing clients and members of ABC would implement these exams if you choose to. To do that is Tom Healy. He is our program manager. Tom now oversees ABC's testing services, so he's your go-to when it comes time to talk about getting new exams up for your program or talking about different administration methods, the computer-based, paper-based, and web-based formats. Tom?
Thank you, Megan. I will be offering a high-level overview of the transition process for these new exams, with the understanding that we will address each program's specific needs during the individual implementation process for each program. So to be clear, ABC will not be implementing any exam changes without the program's consent. The switch to the new standardized exams is completely voluntary and at each program's discretion. The cost of the exams that you're currently paying will remain exactly the same, and there will not be any implementation or maintenance fees to make the switch. We are aspiring to make the transition as seamless as possible, so the processes that are currently in place for ordering and scoring will remain exactly the same unless a change is dictated by your program. So our goal was to give the testing programs ample time to consider and adopt the new standardized forms. So while they may be adopted any time, if a program currently utilizes the current standardized exam, the 2012 standardized exam, and does not wish to implement the new 2017 standardized exam, the 2012 forms will adopt a customized exam status on January 1, 2019. So with that exam status, there will be some associated fees with our customized exam program, but we will not move you over to the 2017 exams without your consent. So to aid in the transition of the 2012 to 2017 exams, we'll be providing to all of our testing clients a standardized exam implementation package. These packages will offer a brief overview of the newest exam, your options for reviewing the new forms, and an implementation worksheet, which will collect all the information relevant to your program's transition to the new exams. These implementation packages should be delivered no later than October 1, so here in the next week or two. We can offer testing clients wishing to preview the new exams for consideration in their program 2 options for viewing the new forms, either paper-based review or web-based review. The paper-based review books cost a mere $5 plus shipping and carry the same stipulations as an actual exam book, paper exam book, wherein they must be returned to ABC's offices within 9 months to avoid any additional fees. We do this for exam security reasons, to keep the content secure, certainly. We need about 3 weeks to generate and ship paper review books, so please keep that in mind when you are placing your orders. Our web-based review is a convenient option, no-cost option that allows programs to review the material over the internet. The material is presented through our testing software, so reviewers would experience the exam content as actual candidates would. We can set a web-based review up for multiple sets of access credentials in order to facilitate numerous reviews during a particular time window. It's a very popular option for members with operator certification boards when face-to-face meetings might not be feasible. So in order to take advantage of this, programs only need to submit the names and email addresses for the reviewers, as well as the dates the review is going to be conducted. And I will share with you access credentials, so exam URLs and login information for each reviewer. We can generate these web-based reviews within 2 weeks of the order, so, but both of these options will be outlined in the implementation package. Also included in that package will be the implementation worksheet, where a program can annotate determinations about details such as the desired timeline for implementation, specific exam titles, officially acknowledge that the pretest items are on the exam, and a chance to opt into an information sharing initiative. So ABC is organizing this initiative to assist certifiers in communicating which standardized exam is being utilized in their program to better assist candidates in identifying the correct need-to-know criteria as well as exam preparation materials. So by opting into this program, certifiers agree to allow information such as their program's name and exam titles for each standardized exam to be made publicly available. This initiative is an effort to encourage transparency, not only for candidates, but also among operator certification programs using the standardized exam. So all of these exams are set and ready to go through all 3 of our administration methods, both paper, web, and computer-based administration. The timelines do vary with each method, though, so we'll walk through those real quick. If your program utilizes paper-based testing, we are offering an exchange program for any previous version test books. Exam books may be returned for 50% credit towards the purchase of new exam books. You're welcome to take advantage of that program until December 31, 2018, which incidentally is the date the old standardized exam becomes customized. So we've got a little bit of time to discuss and the implementation processes. If switching over to the new exams is not a feasible, all at once is not a feasible option for your program, we can work with you to manage your current paper-based inventory. So we can provide older exam books to fill out a testing session if necessary. However, if that situation does take place, it is very important that it is made explicitly clear which version of the exam you're ordering so as not to cross-contaminate. For testing clients who are considering making the move to electronic exams, so either our paper or our web-based or computer-based options, it is worth mentioning that there are no setup costs to implement either of those testing methodologies. So if you have any questions or have been thinking about making the move to electronic exams, please don't hesitate to reach out, and perhaps we can roll the 2017 implementation into that process. So ultimately, the transition to the new forms can be done in 4 weeks for both paper and web-based administration, and 10 weeks for computer-based administration through our testing partner, PSI. Please, when planning your transition to these newest exams, take those timelines into consideration. Finally, it's important for each program adopting the new material, the new exams, to communicate the change to their stakeholders. Operators, trainers, and other stakeholders need to be aware of what changes are taking place in your program and when those changes will take effect. They should also be made aware of what resources, the new resources that are available, such as the need-to-know criteria, the updated formula conversion tables, the updated exam reference material, and incidentally, all of those pieces of information are on our website, and it has been updated and ready to go. As well as new exam preparation resources, such as the study guides from EWWA and WEF's manuals. So we will work with each program implementing the new exams to ensure that they have all of the current and accurate information to share with their stakeholders. I will be your contact here at ABC for all of the implementation processes. So if you have any questions or concerns or want to discuss it, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, we have just a little bit of time left for some of your questions. I know we have some that have come over. One that there were a number of questions related to training and math training sessions. You know, what kind of changes could we expect? You know, are these tests going to make it easier for operators, or you know, how are they going to affect the operators? And I thought it'd be best if, say, one of our subject matter experts, Leanna, Gavin, if you could unmute Leanna, would maybe speak to this if Chuck or Brian have something to say as well. But Leanna, do you want to take a few of the questions related to?
Certainly. Thank you. The math stuff, I think, is going to be made much more simple and much more focused with the new exam format, as well as the need-to-know criteria and the content outlines, because the examinees know going into the testing procedure exactly how many questions are going to require calculations. The formula sheets contain the calculations necessary, and as Megan pointed out, they're going to get the best answer by using that formula sheet. So for trainers and folks that are testing or training to the content material on the test, if you just incorporate the formula conversion sheets in your training materials and help folks understand, I find that most folks have the difficulty in doing math word problems, helping them to extract the information from the word problem to be able to apply the appropriate formula and be able to find it on the reference materials and apply it in an appropriate manner. Other than that, I think you're going to see that the exam materials themselves have not changed as much as you might think they have. The content is much more clear. The reference materials are much more clear, and knowing what you have for exam material content with regards to math calculations is extremely clear in the new format.
And this is Chuck. I would agree with Leanna. Review and understand the formula sheets. Very important.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Brian. I'm sorry. Anything else?
No, I agree.
Okay.
They're completely with the exams.
Okay.
Next, we had a couple of questions just to verify that pre-test questions are here to stay, and the answer is yes. So those standardized exam forms, moving on from here on out, the future generations, will include 110 questions. And again, that is really to our advantage because it'll allow us to continue to seamlessly update those exams without having to go through that delayed scoring pilot phase that we really appreciate your participation in, but no, it's definitely a communication challenge and a struggle for operators that are waiting for those scores. So the pre-tests are here. They'll allow us to get new items onto the exam forms without those delays.
Right, thanks, Megan. A number of questions related to use of reference materials, and I think it can't be emphasized enough. Megan covered that in hers, but there's never been a better alignment of industry reference material to our current need to know and our exams. And so utilizing CSUS, AWWA, and WEP and their new materials, their study guides that will be coming out in the coming months and year, I think would benefit programs and operators up and down the line as they really do. People have been utilizing the new NTKs in their development. One of the other questions, and I think we mentioned this earlier, was in reference to reciprocity and how we feel this will help with reciprocity. By utilizing an exam that was developed with the complexity and the depth that was mentioned by Andrew and John and Megan, you really get to a level, you understand that we have a standardized exam in this industry that if you were to employ the standardized exam with a program that's similar to Andrew and Andy's and Lori's, you really would almost seamlessly get rid of our reciprocity issues within the U.S. because you could implement your own jurisdictional issues and yet have the assurance that the standardized exams met or more than met the issues that face today's operators and their operations. So strongly believe that the reciprocity issue is being dealt with through the standardized process. Tom,
we had one question that says, with the new standardized exams, will there be a set of specific manuals for examinees to use, or just the study guide that I had mentioned? The exams are based off of all the reference material that we have listed on our website. So there's not an explicit book that outlines everything, but several different manuals from AWWA and WEB. So those are all outlined on our website. You can find them under the reference materials.
Okay. Well, with that, I think it looks like we've come to the end of our questions and the end of our time today. We thank you all for staying with us and participating in today's webinar. I think Tom really covered the implementation process well, but again, do not hesitate to reach out to him. Our contact information is on the screen. As I and others have said throughout today's webinar, our guiding mission for the team here at ABC, we have an incredible staff. We have an amazing volunteer leadership. It's to assist you in making your OpCert programs the best they can be by providing you the best certification tools and services available. And that means standardized exams. I think we stand with you when we endeavor to create the best operator workforce for our water systems in our communities. Change doesn't come easy to us, in large part due to societal government constraints. However, at ABC, we're trying to do our part to bring to you the latest standards and services to create strong certification programs that are supported by standardized exams that are valid and legally defensible. These are the best exams ABC has ever produced, and yet we know we'll do better in future generations. We're hopeful we answered most of your questions today. If not, do not hesitate to reach out to any one of us. The team of ABC will be contacting many of you in the coming months to discuss your program-specific implementation of the new exams. Thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing many of you, at the ASWA conference next month in Norfolk, Virginia, and again at ABC's Innovation and Certification Conference taking place in January 2018 in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.